And that kind of tees us up because we actually want to talk about the geographic disparities in how Americans approach generosity and giving. Because, George, we ran our own study that we're calling the Total Civic Generosity Report, where we analyzed data from a whole host of sources, including the IRS, the AmeriCorps, the US Census Bureau, and all sorts of other legislative briefings to come up with a comprehensive report of how states are contributing to philanthropic causes, whether that's monetarily or informally via volunteering or formally via work. George, some interesting things to pull out of here. One key takeaway, George, is that households earning under $50,000 contribute approximately 14.2% of their income to charity. Households earning between 500K and 2 million contribute just 3.9%. So, George, one key theme from this study is that we want to challenge the notion that high value donors, your big rollers, are just as important as your small dollar donors, or more important than your small dollar donors. That is not the case, George. Small dollar donors deserve just as much attention as the big guys. And we have this broken out by state because it presents itself differently. So for George, for example, Utah had the highest ratio of adjusted gross income giving at 6.61%, and a 46.6 formal volunteer rate and a 68% informal helping rate. George, of course, for folks who know Utah, there's lots of community infrastructure for volunteering, as it's the home of the Latter-day Saints there. But then we have other states like Wyoming, right, where, helping out in the remote state and less populous state of Wyoming is still really important. So, George, generosity is presenting itself monetarily and in actions in informal and formal volunteering differently across the country. What were some of the key takeaways that you wanted to pull out from this study?
Yeah, I think the point of the religious decline in general and sort of the rise of the NA non-affiliated, which happens to have an impact, I think, really on the types of measurable volunteerism numbers. And so we divided this with regard to wallet and work. Those are two different things. But here's the interesting thing is when you comparatively look across states, you have high distribution between like Nevada and Utah, which live in different quadrants, opposite sides. And some of the exploration of, why that is in different areas could be interesting, exploring your state and seeing where they are as an interesting benchmark, but also potentially for regional targeting. I don't think we pay attention enough to the way that maybe, like, if you're just running we want to raise money across the US, like, actually geography matters quite a bit for messaging, dormant level, base level engagement rates. And I'm just a huge geek and I love playing with all these data.
No, George, I think it's really fascinating. And it's really cool to see, right, our giving and volunteer rates side by side, because I think those are frequently disaggregated into different conversations. And it helps us give a more holistic understanding of generosity across these states. And I can see which states are at the top and the bottom. By the way, this is not an assessment of what states are good or bad, right? It's just states that have different challenges, maybe necessarily, right? States that, presumably have more ability to donate and volunteer are perhaps better resourced than states that aren't, right? So there's nothing prescriptive about this data. But I think when you take it at face value, it does tell some interesting stories. So, George, if you're a nonprofit leader, what are you taking away from this?
There's a high variance between states that you're in. custom messaging based on state is an interesting question to ask once your list size grows beyond, let's say, 5,000, 10,000 donors range when you're messaging and emails, considering that as a way of looking at it. And, I think as an anchor point, it's kind of curious when you look at a stat like the people who give the most are the ones who can least afford it as a finding here, whereas just a percent of generosity, anchoring to where people's wealth actually is and their capacity to give matters quite a bit. And I think, is an interesting stat to surface and could be an interesting stat to see how this tracks in your own data as far as you have it and can look at it and see if you over or under index, be it by a geographic area or by the capacity to give versus amount given. And consider it as a ratio.